They say a single night can change everything. I never believed that until it happened to me. Hey, welcome to Cupidoops, where love and logic are officially divorced, and chaos has full custody. Like and subscribe. Chaos begins. It all started with the gala, a dazzling event where people clinked glasses filled with sparkling champagne and exchanged smiles that never quite reached their eyes. My company, a mid-tier marketing firm, had managed to snag an invitation. Not that I belonged there. Employees like me weren't meant to be seen, just to blend in, serve smiles, and quietly disappear. But Cynthia, my ever-persistent best friend, had other plans. "Come on, Samantha," she'd pleaded, fixing my hair like I was her personal doll. "You're always working. For once, let loose." Let loose. Easier said than done, especially in a room where fortunes were flaunted like trophies. My modest black dress and scuffed heels were a poor attempt at elegance. And yet, I nodded and slipped into the glittering world of Seoul's elite. The air smelled of expensive perfume and polished arrogance. Men in tailored suits exchanged hollow laughter, while women draped in jewels paraded like they owned the night. Among them, I spotted the figure I'd only ever seen in business magazines, Raven Lancaster, the cold-hearted CEO of Raven Corporation. Ruthless, calculated, untouchable. His sharp features were like something sculpted out of marble, striking, but lifeless. Eyes dark and unreadable, he navigated the room with the air of a man who had nothing to prove. Everyone whispered his name, but no one dared to approach without purpose. I should have known better than to stare. "Enjoying the view?" The voice startled me. A man in a wine-red suit smirked, his glass tilting lazily. I recognized him, Ryan Barron, Raven's right-hand man. His grin was too wide, his gaze too interested. "I'm just... lost?" He laughed, leaning closer. "That explains it. You don't belong here." The words stung more than I cared to admit. I stepped back, but before I could escape, another voice cut through. "Ryan." Low, cold, commanding, Raven Lancaster. He stood just a few steps away, his piercing gaze locking onto mine. There was no smile, no warmth, only curiosity. It felt like the world around us dimmed, leaving just the two of us. "Is she bothering you?" Raven's voice was even, but the weight of his presence was suffocating. No," I stammered. "I was just leaving." But Raven's eyes didn't waver. Instead, something flickered in them: amusement. Intrigue? I couldn't tell. "Stay," he said, his words more of an order than a request. "A face like yours doesn't belong in the shadows." The comment caught me off guard. Was that a compliment? Before I could respond, Raven nodded toward the balcony, silently inviting me to follow. My heart pounded. Every rational part of me screamed to decline. Yet, I found myself walking beside him, the golden glow of the chandeliers fading as we stepped into the cool night air. "I don't usually entertain strangers," Raven said, his voice cutting through the silence. "But you're different." "Different how?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied me, as if peeling away the layers I tried so desperately to keep intact. "You're not afraid of me." He was wrong. I was terrified, not of the man standing before me, but of the way he made my heart race. "I don't make it a habit to fear people," I managed, trying to sound unaffected. A faint smirk tugged at his lips. "Good." We talked. Or rather, he asked, and I answered. About my work, my family, my dreams, things I hadn't shared with anyone in a long time. Raven was sharp, his words calculated. Yet there was a warmth beneath the ice. A flicker of something human. Time slipped away. The gala became a blur of distant laughter and clinking glasses. And when Raven finally leaned closer, his voice barely above a whisper, I knew I was past the point of return. Come with me. I should have said no. I should have turned and left, pretending this night never happened. But I didn't. Instead, I followed him. And that's how it all began. They say regret comes in waves. For me, it crashed down the moment I opened my eyes. The early morning light spilled through the cracks of the heavy curtains, illuminating the luxury I had no business waking up in. Silk sheets tangled around me, the soft scent of cologne lingering in the air. It was intoxicating, overwhelming, a cruel reminder of the night before. And then I felt it, the emptiness. The other side of the bed was cold. Raven Lancaster was gone. No note, no lingering warmth, nothing but the ghost of his presence. I should have expected it. Men like him didn't offer goodbyes. But what unsettled me the most wasn't his absence. It was the ache, not just the dull throb in my body, but the hollow pang in my chest. One night. That's all it was supposed to be. I pushed the thoughts away, forcing myself upright. My dress from the night before lay discarded on the floor like a forgotten memory. I gathered the scraps of my dignity, slipped it on, and hurried out. The hotel's opulent hallways felt suffocating. Each step echoed, as though the walls themselves whispered my shame. The staff didn't spare me a glance. They were used to this. One-night stands, whispered scandals, none of it mattered to them. But it mattered to me. By the time I stumbled onto the bustling Seoul streets, the cool morning air did little to soothe the burn on my cheeks. My phone buzzed. Cynthia! Of course. Sam. Where did you go last night? Did you seriously ditch me? I hesitated. What could I even say? That I spent the night tangled in the arms of the most powerful man in the city? That I made a mistake I couldn't take back? Me. I'm fine. I'll explain later. Lying had never come so easily. Weeks passed. I buried myself in work, pretending the night with Raven never happened. The whispers at the office swirled stories of Raven Corporation's latest acquisitions, of Raven's cold efficiency. Every time his name came up, my stomach twisted. But he never called, never texted. Just like I knew he wouldn't. It should have ended there. Until it didn't. The nausea struck without warning. At first, I blamed the endless cups of coffee, the skipped lunches. But when the dizziness followed, I knew. Something wasn't right. Denial was a powerful thing. I told myself it was stress, exhaustion, anything but the truth that clawed its way to the surface. But the truth had a way of finding you. The pharmacy was too bright, too sterile. I avoided eye contact with the cashier, snatching the pregnancy test and paying without a word. The box burned in my hands as I rushed home, every step heavy with dread. Minutes later, I stood frozen in my tiny bathroom, the world spinning. 2 pink lines, my legs buckled beneath me. It wasn't possible. It couldn't be. But it was. Days passed in a haze. I went through the motions, but nothing felt real. Sam noticed, of course. "You've been acting strange," she said one afternoon, narrowing her eyes over her iced coffee. "And don't even try to tell me it's work." I shifted uncomfortably. "It's nothing." Her eyes narrowed further. "Samantha." The weight of it all cracked something inside me. "I'm pregnant." The words hung between us, impossible to take back. Sam's mouth fell open, her shock palpable. "What?" she half whispered, half shouted. Is it?" I nodded. "Ravens." She paled. "Oh my God." Tears threatened to spill, but I swallowed them down. "I'm keeping it, but I don't expect anything from him." Sam reached for my hand, her grip warm and steady. "You don't have to do this alone." But I already knew that. I had her. I had my family. I didn't need Raven Lancaster. Or so I thought. fate had other plans. It happened at a corporate event, a business seminar my company insisted I attend. The venue buzzed with executives, but the air shifted the moment he entered. Raven Lancaster. Dressed in a tailored black suit, his presence commanded the room without effort. Conversations faltered, all eyes drawn to him, including mine. I should have looked away, but instead, I froze. And then he saw me. His gaze locked onto mine, confusion flickering beneath the stoic mask. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then, with the deliberate confidence only he possessed, Raven strode towards me. Samantha. Hearing my name in his voice unraveled everything I'd tried to bury. CEO Raven, I replied, forcing composure. You left without a word. His voice was low, unreadable. What did you expect? I shot back, bitterness coating my words. A romantic farewell? His jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Sam's voice rang from behind me. Samantha, we should go. I nodded, stepping away, but Raven's voice stopped me cold. We're not finished. There it was, the authority, the demand. But this time, I wasn't the same woman he left behind. Yes, we are. And with that, I walked away. But something told me our story was far from over. Days passed, but the weight of Raven Lancaster's words still lingered. We're not finished. I could still hear the low timbre of his voice, see the sharp intensity in his gaze. But I had no intention of crossing paths with him again. Whatever had happened that night was a mistake. I'd made my choice, and now I had to live with it. Except choices don't always stay in the shadows. The nausea returned with a vengeance. Morning after morning, I stumbled from my bed, clutching the cold porcelain of the sink, willing the sickness away. Each time, it reminded me of the undeniable truth. I wasn't just Han Samantha anymore. I was a mother, but that truth wasn't mine alone to bear. Are you sure about this? Sam's voice was tight with worry as we sat at the small cafe down the street from my office. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee did little to ease my nerves. I don't have a choice, I murmured, stirring my untouched drink. He needs to know. After how he left you? Samantha, he didn't even call. What if he doesn't care? I finished for her, my chest tightening. Then I'll walk away. I'm not doing this for him. The baby deserves to know who their father is, even if he wants nothing to do with us. Sam's fingers curled around mine, offering the comfort I desperately needed. I'll support you no matter what. Just be careful, okay? I nodded, though the trembling in my hands betrayed my calm facade. The Raven Corporation building loomed ahead, its sleek glass exterior reflecting the sky like a fortress untouchable by the world below. With each step, the memories clawed their way back. Raven's hands on my waist, his lips brushing against mine, the way he'd looked at me as if I was something precious. I straightened my shoulders. That was the past. The present was a different story. Miss, do you have an appointment? The receptionist's smile was polite, but her eyes held the unmistakable glint of curiosity. I'm here to see Raven Lancaster, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Her expression faltered. CEO Raven is in a meeting. Would you like to? I'll wait. Minutes dragged into an hour. Just as I began to consider leaving, the sleek elevator doors slid open, and there he was, Raven Lancaster, dressed in a charcoal suit, every movement calculated and controlled. His gaze swept across the room, dark eyes narrowing the moment they landed on me. Samantha. His voice was low, a mixture of surprise and something else I couldn't place. We need to talk, I said, forcing myself to meet his gaze. His jaw clenched, but without a word, he nodded. My office. The air in the elevator was suffocating. Raven stood mere inches away, his presence as commanding as ever. The scent of his cologne stirred memories I wished I could forget. "Why are you here?" His voice broke the silence, though his expression gave nothing away. "I have something to tell you," I replied, my heart pounding. "And you may not like it." He said nothing, but I saw the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. When the doors opened, I followed him into his expansive office. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Seoul skyline, but I had no time to admire the view. Raven leaned against his desk, arms crossed, waiting. "Well?" I took a shaky breath, every fiber of my being screaming to run. But I couldn't. Not now. "I'm pregnant," I said, the words tumbling out before I could lose my nerve. "And it's yours." For a moment, there was nothing. No shock, no anger, only an unsettling stillness. "You're lying," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not." My hands trembled, but I held his gaze. "I don't want anything from you. I just thought you deserved to know." Raven's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening with something unreadable. "And you waited weeks to tell me?" I wasn't sure how. My voice broke. "I didn't think you'd care." He stepped forward, the air between us charged. "You don't get to decide what I care about, Samantha." His words stung, but before I could respond, the door burst open. "Hyung, the shareholders are—" Ryan Barron's voice faltered as his gaze flickered between us. "Am I interrupting?" Raven's glare could have frozen the air. "Get out." Ryan hesitated, his usual smirk nowhere to be seen. But he obeyed, the door clicking shut behind him. Raven turned back to me, his expression unreadable. "We're not done." I said what I came to say. My voice wavered, but I forced myself to stand tall. "Whether you're in this child's life is your choice. I won't beg you." I spun on my heel, the weight of his gaze burning into my back. But just as I reached the door, his voice stopped me. "Samantha." I froze. "I'll be in touch." It wasn't a promise, it was a declaration, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I should feel relieved or terrified. Days passed, but the echo of Raven Lancaster's words never left me. "I'll be in touch." But silence followed. No calls, no messages, just an endless loop of second-guessing and anxiety. Had I made a mistake? Should I have handled it differently? The weight of uncertainty clung to me, suffocating and relentless. Then it happened. A sleek black car pulled up outside my apartment, just as the evening light faded. I hadn't expected visitors. The sharp knock on the door made my heart jump. "Samantha." Raven stood at the entrance, tall and imposing. The dim hallway lighting cast shadows over his chiseled face, making him look even more unreadable. "Raven?" My voice wavered. "What are you doing here?" "We need to talk." His gaze dropped to my stomach, though it wasn't visible yet. Still, the knowledge of what grew within me hung heavily between us. "May I come in?" Despite every instinct telling me this was a terrible idea, I stepped aside. The tension was suffocating as he entered, his presence overwhelming the small space. "I thought you'd call," I said, closing the door. "I don't do things halfway." His voice was low, but firm. "We're not discussing this over the phone." He turned to face me, and for the first time, there was no trace of the ruthless CEO. There was only a man standing before the mother of his child. "I want to be part of the baby's life." The confession came like a thunderclap. I searched his face for any sign of hesitation, but all I saw was unwavering resolve. "Raven." "I'm not finished." He took a step closer, his eyes never leaving mine. "Marriage." The word hit me like a tidal wave. My breath caught. "What?" Marry me, Samantha. I stumbled back, my mind spinning. You can't be serious. I am. His jaw tightened. This child needs stability. You and we can provide that together. Marriage isn't just a business deal, I shot back. You don't even know you. He cut me off, his voice dangerously calm. I know enough. I know you're strong. I know you didn't come to me seeking money or power, and I know that the night we spent together wasn't meaningless. The words lingered in the air, igniting something between us, but I couldn't ignore the storm of emotions swirling inside me. Raven, I don't want to trap you in something you'll regret. His eyes darkened. You think I feel trapped? I opened my mouth, but no words came. I'm offering you a future, Samantha. A family. He stepped even closer, his presence overwhelming. Tell me you don't feel the same pull I do. Tell me you don't want our child to grow up with both parents. The vulnerability in his voice cracked my resolve, but fear held me captive. I'm scared, I whispered. His hand reached for mine, his fingers lacing with mine in a way that sent warmth surging through me. So am I. Raven's thumb brushed softly over my knuckles. But we can face it together. Tears welled in my eyes. The powerful CEO who commanded boardrooms and controlled billion-dollar deals now stood before me uncertain, yet determined. Say yes, Samantha, he murmured. Let's build something real. My heart pounded. Could I trust him? Could I risk everything? But as I looked into his unwavering gaze, the answer slowly surfaced. I'll think about it. Raven nodded, though a flicker of disappointment passed over his face. I'll wait. And with that, he turned, leaving me alone with the racing thoughts that refused to settle. The CEO had made his proposal, but the choice was mine. The weight of Raven's proposal still clung to me, lingering like a storm cloud. I'd spent days trying to convince myself that his offer was logical and practical even. But the pounding of my heart every time I recalled his words said otherwise. Marry him. The thought unraveled me. And yet, the mere possibility had planted itself in my mind. But not everyone saw it that way. Are you out of your mind? My mother's voice trembled with disbelief, her delicate hands trembling as she gripped her cup of tea. Marrying Raven Lancaster? Samantha, do you even realize what you're saying? I know it sounds sudden. I tried, though the knot in my stomach tightened. But he's the father. He wants to be involved. Involved? She scoffed. That man is ruthless. He's not offering marriage out of love. It's about responsibility about his image. I flinched. And what if it's not? What if he genuinely wants to try? Men like him don't try, she shot back. They control. They dictate. And once they have what they want, they discard the rest. I clenched my fists beneath the table. He's not like that. My mother's eyes softened, but the worry remained. Samantha, I just want you to be happy, not trapped in a loveless marriage. Her words stung because a part of me feared the same. But before I could respond, the front door creaked open. Am I interrupting something? My brother, Ethan, stepped inside, his sharp eyes scanning the tension that lingered between us. His presence brought little comfort. Ethan had always been protective to a fault. And the second he learned of Raven's proposal, I knew he wouldn't stay silent. Samantha, he started, his voice low. I heard about Raven Lancaster. Of course he had. In our family, news traveled faster than reason. Are you seriously considering it? He demanded, marrying a man like him? He's not what you think, I defended, though my voice wavered. Ethan scoffed. He's a CEO, Samantha. He lives in a world of mergers and acquisitions. You're just part of the deal now. That's not fair, I snapped, anger flaring in my chest. He has every right to be in the baby's life, and maybe we can make it work. You deserve more than a marriage built on obligation. His jaw clenched. And if he hurts you, I won't stand by and watch. I'm not asking for your permission. My voice shook, but I held his gaze. This is my decision. Ethan's expression darkened, but before he could say more, my mother's voice broke the tension. Just promise me one thing, Samantha, she pleaded softly. Think this through. Don't let fear or guilt decide for you. I nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at me. Would I regret saying yes? Or would I regret walking away? Days passed, and Raven's words echoed in my mind. Each time I reached for my phone, I hesitated, but the inevitable couldn't be avoided. When I finally stepped into the towering Raven Corporation building, the weight of my decision bore down on me. Raven was already waiting, his imposing figure framed against the city skyline. You came. His voice was steady, though the slight tension in his jaw betrayed his anticipation. I did. I met his gaze, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. But before I give you an answer, I need the truth. He arched a brow. The truth? Why are you doing this, Raven? My voice softened. Is this about the baby? Or is it about something more? For a moment, the mask he wore slipped. There was vulnerability beneath the surface, a glimpse of the man he hid from the world. It's about both, he admitted. I won't deny that the baby changed everything, but you've changed everything. My heart pounded. And if I say no? A shadow flickered across his face, but he quickly masked it. Then I'll respect your choice. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. But I won't stop caring. I'll be there for our child, no matter what. His sincerity shook me to my core. But even as I stood before him, the weight of my family's warnings echoed in my mind. I need time, I whispered. Raven nodded, though the tension never left his eyes. I'll wait, but not forever. With that, I left the echoes of our conversation following me. Family tension, unspoken fears, and impossible choices. The road ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same. The morning air was crisp as I stepped out of the apartment, but the chill did nothing to calm my nerves. Days had passed since my conversation with Raven, yet the uncertainty remained. My mother's warnings and Ethan's accusations echoed in my mind, but none of that prepared me for what was waiting. My phone buzzed just as I reached the street corner. A flood of notifications lit up the screen, one after another. Headlines, articles, and social media posts, all fixated on the same shocking news. Raven Lancaster announces engagement. CEO to marry expectant mother, Han Samantha. My breath caught. The world tilted beneath me. The trembling in my hands made it impossible to read further, but the damage was done. Every corner of the internet buzzed with speculation. And the most humiliating part? I hadn't even said yes. I stormed into Raven Corporation's headquarters, ignoring the curious stares from the staff. The luxury of the lobby blurred around me. Only one thought burned in my mind: Raven had crossed a line. Samantha? His voice greeted me the moment I burst into his office. He stood behind his desk, composed as always, though the slight furrow of his brow betrayed his tension. You had no right, I seethed, holding up my phone. How could you do this without my consent? He met my glare without flinching. It was necessary. Necessary? I repeated, incredulous. You announced our engagement like it was a business merger. The media would have found out eventually, Raven said coolly. This way, we control the narrative. Control? My voice cracked. You didn't even ask me. His jaw tightened. I would have, if you weren't so determined to run from this. I needed time. And I gave it to you, he countered, his tone sharper now. But time won't stop the rumors. The press was already circling. Announcing it first was the only way to protect you. I faltered, the weight of his words sinking in. Protect me. It was a strange concept coming from him, a man who commanded corporations with cold efficiency. I don't need your protection, I whispered. Yes, you do. Raven's voice softened, but the intensity in his gaze never wavered. The world we're stepping into is ruthless. I won't let anyone drag your name through the mud. For a moment, the room fell silent. My heart pounded as I searched his face for any sign of regret, but all I saw was resolve. This isn't just about the baby, is it? I asked quietly. Raven's lips parted, but no words came. The answer lingered between us, unspoken, yet undeniable. The news spread like wildfire. By the time I returned home, reporters had already begun camping outside my apartment. Flashes from their cameras pierced through the windows, and their endless questions echoed from the street below. But the most daunting task awaited me within the walls of my own family's home. My mother's expression was unreadable as I entered. Ethan, however, wasted no time. So, it's true. His voice was laced with disbelief. You're really going through with it? I didn't agree to this, I shot back. Raven acted on his own. Then why are you still defending him? He demanded. I'm not. I exhaled sharply, trying to steady myself. But this isn't as simple as you think. There's more at stake. My mother, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. And what about you, Samantha? Her gaze softened. Is this what you want? I hesitated. I don't know. The truth hung in the air. My mind was a battlefield of doubts and unspoken hopes, but one thing was certain. I couldn't keep running. The next morning, the city buzzed with speculation. Photographers lined the sidewalks, and journalists waited eagerly for the slightest glimpse of Raven Lancaster and his mysterious fiancée. And Raven delivered. A sleek black car pulled up outside Raven Corporation, the cameras flashing wildly. The door opened, and Raven stepped out, dressed in his signature tailored suit. But the real shock came when I emerged beside him. The murmurs grew. Every step we took toward the entrance was accompanied by shouted questions. Ms. Hahn, how do you feel about the engagement?
Is it a marriage of convenience? CEO Raven, what are your wedding plans? Raven's hand tightened around mine. Despite the chaos, his expression remained calm, unwavering. He leaned slightly toward me, his voice low. Are you ready? I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. Let's give them their story. And with that, we faced the world not as two strangers caught in a scandal, but as the couple everyone was dying to know. The soft hum of the city surrounded us as Raven and I stood at the edge of the balcony, overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. Yet, the brightness of the city lights paled in comparison to the turmoil within me. It had been days since our public appearance, days of endless questions, whispers, and judgment. But the real storm wasn't outside. It was within my heart. You haven't said much since then. Raven's voice broke the silence. I turned to face him, his expression unreadable. He was always composed, always guarded the Raven Lancaster the world knew. But the man before me now wasn't just a CEO. He was the father of my child, and despite everything, he had chosen to stand beside me. You announced our engagement to protect me, I said softly. But what about you, Raven? Was it all just business? His gaze flickered, something deeper stirring beneath his stoic facade. I told myself it was. And now? I'm not so sure. The vulnerability in his voice caught me off guard. Raven rarely let his emotions show, but I could see it now, the weight he carried, the fears he tried to conceal. My whole life, I was taught that feelings were a weakness, he continued, that love was a distraction. But then you came into my world, and nothing has been the same since. Tears welled in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You broke every rule you set for yourself, and so did I. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against mine. I don't want this to be a contract. I don't want to marry you just because of the baby. I want to marry you because I love you. My breath caught. The words I never thought I'd hear from Raven now echoed in the night. But before I could respond, the door behind us opened. It was Ethan. I hope I'm not interrupting, he said, though the tension in his voice suggested otherwise. Raven's shoulders stiffened, but I held his gaze steady. Ethan, why are you here? To warn you, he answered. There's something you need to know. He handed me a slim envelope. My fingers trembled as I opened it, revealing a stack of photographs, pictures of Raven with a woman, meetings in secret, exchanged glances, the whispers of a scandal that had never quite surfaced. My heart pounded. What is this? Ethan's jaw tightened. The woman's name is Co Rin. The press is already getting their hands on these. They're calling her Raven's mistress. I turned to Raven, but he didn't flinch. It's not what it looks like. Then what is it? I demanded. She's an old friend, he said calmly. She was blackmailed by one of my competitors. I was trying to help her, but I didn't tell you because I didn't want to drag you into it. Ethan scoffed. And you expect her to believe that? I expect her to believe me, Raven countered, his voice unwavering, because I've never lied to her. The words struck something within me. Raven had his faults, but dishonesty was never one of them. Ethan, I said firmly, I appreciate your concern, but I can handle this. Please leave. He hesitated, searching my face for any sign of doubt, but when he found none, he turned and left without another word. That night, Raven and I sat together in silence. The accusations, the headlines, none of it mattered anymore. I'm sorry, he whispered, for everything. I shook my head. You were trying to protect the people you care about. That's not something to apologize for. He reached for my hand, intertwining our fingers. I meant what I said, Samantha. I love you. And if you'll have me, I want us to be a real family. Tears finally fell, but this time they weren't from pain. They were relieved, from hope. I love you too, I murmured, and I want our child to grow up surrounded by that love. Raven's arms wrapped around me, holding me close as the past slowly gave way to the future, a future we would build together. Comment your thoughts, like, and subscribe.